Just when we thought it was safe to go back to the footy. That was the sound of optimism flattened. Fremantle promised gold leaf truffle cakes and delivered stale donuts with a surprisingly insipid performance in Geelong, a venue it had mastered in the past, in the worst defeat in Justin Longmuir's time at the helm. There was no vigour, zero spirit, the leadership was missing, they were out-tackled, out-thought and outplayed on just about every metric. Longmuir described their footy after one pre-season game as vanilla. Well, this was a jumbo bag of rotten fish-flavoured bamboozled jelly beans. And if you haven't tasted them, I dare you. Dockers fans got only 6 minutes of joy. That's how long it took first gamer Murphy Reid to kick 4 goals. And the good news is the body of evidence is minimal. It was only round 1. They get a vulnerable Sydney at home on Sunday to get their season on track. West Coast, playing under new coach Andrew McQualter for the first time, revived an old song from a glorious past. They also unveiled a new brand of Harley Reid-inspired halftime WrestleMania. Jack Graham, Liam Baker and Brady Hoff aside, the Eagles forgot they were actually there to get the footy first. Gold Coast didn't. Jared Witts, Matt Rowell and Noah Anderson gave their opponents a lesson in ruckcraft and contested ball. The Suns, remember, have a poor travelling history and produced their biggest ever victory. Again, it's only one game. It's not a Hindenburg disaster, but there's a lot of helium being sucked out of the Eagles' balloons. Can West Coast revive its season? A round 2 clash with Brisbane at the Gabba will make it tough. We are brought to you by Tab Touch. Got the touch? Download the Tab Touch app today. What's gambling really costing you? I am joined by the West Australians' Craig O'Donoghue. Cod, how are you?
Very well, Quarters. Just back from the Cattery myself, so It was good to be down there watching what was an absolute mauling.
Was it as bad as it looked on the TV?
It was probably worse in person. Yeah, it was horrible. They didn't really look like it at any point, and that was the real disappointing thing if you're a Fremantle fan, that they went over there with high expectations. And I think the expectations were too high for that game. I don't think they were ever a genuine chance to win with the team they took over there. But
because it was the youngest team named in round 1?
Yeah, that I was surprised that had been missed by so many people. Like this was a team that had an average age of 24 and 244 days. 24 years, 244 days. Richmond was more experienced in that regard.
That surprised me.
They had an average age of 24 and 306 days. Fremantle had 1,695 games of experience out there by the end of the game, if you give them all that game that counts. Richmond's was 1,752. Richmond had more players with less than 50 games. They had 13 with less than 50, whereas Fremantle had 10. But West Coast had 11 players with less than 50 on Sunday. So this is still a really young Fremantle team. When you take out Fife and Walters and Bolton and Young and Darcy, the depth really falls away quickly.
Well, Bolton hasn't played for them yet, and one thing I will say is they have won their last 2 there. So They do know they're okay with the shape of the ground, which confuses some. I still expected more than that, though. I think you say they never looked like a chance. They looked like they were a sneaky chance when Murphy Reid went to work with his amazing 4 goals in 6 minutes. But in a way, that's an indictment on the team that it's left to a first gamer to give them some hope. And what really disturbed me was they sort of got themselves back into it and or near, at least to have a crack. And the way Geelong just dictated that final term, slowed the game down, got it back on its terms, and then the floodgates opened. It was all too easy.
It was, and They wasted time, Geelong, for about 8 minutes in that last quarter. They said, okay, you got it down to 21 points. We're going to take some time off the clock and just make sure you lose a little bit of hope. And then they kicked 10 goals after wasting time. So that was really concerning. You mentioned the Murphy Reid. He was amazing for 6 minutes. But if you take out that 6-minute patch and the fact that Michael Frederick kicked a goal on the halftime siren, then kicked another goal 15 seconds into the third quarter, and then Bailey Banfield kicked one from the restart. There's 7 of their goals in the blink of an eye. Whereas what happened for the rest of the game? It's just dried up. And I look back and I don't think they picked the right team. Mm-hmm. They picked a lot of backmen. They didn't have a lot of forwards. So their backmen, traditional backmen, Wagner, Pearce, Draper, Ryan, Walker, Clark, Cox, Warner, Chapman. There's 9 of them. Whereas your forward line, you got Reid, who in his first game, Switkowski, who gets hurt, Frederick, Tracy, Amos and Banfield. And that's it. And then you're relying on Jackson and Reedy to go down there as the other ones. And it just wasn't balanced enough, I didn't think.
The defence was under siege. The forward line looked static. It didn't look like it was doing what it's supposed to do, and that's create avenues and just keep the Geelong fence on the move.
And I don't think either Tracy or Amos have had great pre-seasons. We've talked them up about how well they've trained over summer, but they didn't play well against the All-Stars or against Melbourne. They didn't play well on the weekend either. And then you take out the dynamic element of Walters and Bolton and the kicking skills of Hayden Young to get the ball down there for them. And suddenly you're looking around going, how are they going to find some goals? And it was Murphy Reid to create a little bit of excitement and a bit out of nothing that was able to do that. But the rest of them didn't look like they were ever really going to take advantage.
Was it too meek a capitulation? Like, did you see any fight there? Like, have a crack, do something, change it up, stop, halt the momentum, just do something. Didn't seem like there was anything there.
No, and there was a passage of play during the second quarter where you look back and you go, how did that happen? How did they make so many mistakes in a row? And if I look at it here, so Luke Ryan overruns a ball which he'd normally pick up. Then they lose a 2-on-1 contest where they have a clear, obvious advantage. Geelong get the ball out the back and Stengel kicks a goal. And you think there's too many mistakes there. From the restart, Andrew Brayshaw wins the centre clearance, just kicks it straight to Geelong. And you go, that doesn't normally happen either. And then shortly afterwards, Tom Stewart took a mark in the half-back line. Andrew Brayshaw's on the mark. And Stewart just walked past him, bounced the ball and took the ball forward, and they got another goal. And then the next goal was Luke Ryan falling over against Patrick Dangerfield. And they had a 2-on-1 against Jeremy Cameron. No one flew for it, and Cameron took a mark. They looked like they weren't focused. They looked like they were a bit shell-shocked by what was going on.
Yeah.
And looking around going, what's happened here? What do I need to do to fix it? Rather than the entire team.
Well, look tentative. They looked tentative. So when they had the ball, say centre wing, they looked like they was hang on, allowing the Geelong defence to get back in shape behind the footy. So and late we saw them force time and time again doing what Geelong loves you to do, and that is kick it straight to Tom Stewart, etc. So Henry was another who
just kept taking marks. They at no stage did it look like the players were confident in each other. It was like they were looking around going, we're expected to come here and play well. Now that we're not, what do we do now? And that they didn't have that ability, which is the real concern, the ability out there to change the game without getting the advice from Justin Lomier. There was pasture in the second quarter. Caleb Sarong got caught on the bench for about 10 minutes, which meant a leader wasn't out there, which doesn't help. He got caught forward in the first quarter as well and couldn't get back into the midfield. And you wonder why wasn't someone able to fix that
so do you think out in the field? Selection-wise left them without a plan B, C or D? Yeah,
because once they lost Switkowski, I looked down at the forward line at one point and went, man, that's an interesting forward line. It included Reedy, who's not a forward, and you go, okay, well, Liam Reedy has never been, he's a ruckman who they asked to play forward because they wanted Jackson in the ruck, but he wasn't going to score goals for them. And then you had Chapman down there as a sub because Switkowski was hurt. And then you look around and you got Matthew Johnson was also down in the forward line, and he's not a forward. So they just lacked the ability to make the necessary changes because I think they'd gone, let's top up with Talls in the back line to try to counter something of Geelong, and it took away a lot of Fremantle's strengths.
Yeah, what did you make of the ruck department? So Reedy, Jackson in the end took up most of the centre bounces, didn't he? And Reedy, who I advocated to play. I still like a proper number one ruckman in there, and I don't think Jackson is. They're a long way from where they need to be.
I'm now convinced that Jackson has to play as the ruckman, and Pat Voss needs to come in this week. Yeah. Reedy can go out. They're playing Grundy, and then you've got Amati as the backup ruckman there, so there's no issues there. Or Tom McCartan as the backup. Pat Voss can ruck.
So Jackson and Voss get the job.
I think Jackson and Voss get the job this week. Voss travelled with them as the emergency didn't play. I don't think Reedy's a forward. And that's the problem. He's a ruckman, and if you want to play Jackson in the middle, which I think they need to because of his ability to win the ball at ground level, they just look more dynamic when he's there.
Well, you know that Voss has never let them down.
Yeah,
whenever he's played.
Yeah,
he hasn't. He's always filled that position adequately, more than adequately. So
yeah. So when Reedy came into the team last year against GWS, Tracy was injured. So Voss was playing as a pure forward. So they couldn't really afford to go in that situation. Now they've got Tracy, Amos. They can play Voss as a third tall. They can play Jackson as the main ruck. And when he's tired, he can go forward or to the bench and Voss can go up and do that. And I think that's a more balanced looking group because I don't see Reedy being mobile enough to play as a genuine forward. He's going to be that big ruckman, but he's not experienced enough at the moment to lead the ruck, and especially against a Brady Grundy, I don't think.
Now, I'm not giving him an out here, but I'm just raising the question, Cod. So it was a 10:30 a.m. Western Standard Time game. Is that a problem? I know they've been doing this for a long time now. They train often at that time. But is that an issue? Like, have you woken up yet? Have you still on Western Standard Time?
I think it has to be an issue, not just, and we can say, oh, they trained at that time, but I look at over the summer with the Perth Wildcats and the Perth Lynx, who I cover in the basketball. When they played at that time, they're horrible. They're horrible. Like the Lynx couldn't get out of their own way in several games where they were starting at 9 and 10 o'clock in the morning. So it has to have an impact. So but I don't think it was enough of an impact for them to be that bad throughout the entire game. And by the last quarter, well, they've got no excuses for 10 goals to 1. But yeah, it is early because, as you say, 10:30 start Western Standard Time, which means you have to be at the ground at 8:30, which means you're up 6:30, and they fly the day on the Thursday. They get there late, so they've only really got one day to acclimatise to that time. So I think that it's definitely going to have some sort of effect on them, but not to the magnitude of the loss.
I feel like we didn't really get a look at Freo at all. Just the Freo did not turn up.
No.
So, and look, it is one sample size. I guess the good news is they don't have to go back to Geelong unless they meet them in finals. And you get that one out of the way. And they've now got 3 in a row at home.
Yeah, and they'll take a lot of lessons out of it. I think the coaching team will go, we made some bad errors here. We picked the wrong team. We tried to be a bit cute with things.
How do you pick the wrong team when you've got 6 months to prepare for it?
I think they went in thinking they'd have probably not Darcy. They would have expected to have Young. They would have expected to have Fife, Walters, and Bolton.
But they don't have Young for 3 weeks. They know he's.
But over pre-season they would have planned a long way out, and then you start to convince yourself. I reckon the closer you get, you need to make these sorts of moves. Because when have they ever had 4 tall defenders? They just haven't. Why would you play Chapman as the sub? Why is Warner on a wing? All these different things where I think they talk themselves into it a little bit and they just made mistakes. So I think when you make big mistakes like that, I think they'll end up going, we need to play our way with our team in our style and prove to be better in that way, because I think they spent too much time allowing themselves to think about Geelong in this game. So I think they'll learn from that lesson. The players will learn that you can't just not rally in some way. The leaders have to speak up a bit more. Everyone has to be harder at the footy. So all the little lessons around the game have come together from one big disaster, which in round 1 will allow you to maybe move forward a little bit from it, because if they had a loss by 5 goals and you go, there were a lot of mistakes or a lot of problems, they could think, that might work again in the future. None of that will work in the future. Throw it all out and go back to what you know. Yeah,
it scared me. The last quarter scared me a bit. Do we put too much value in round 1?
You can at times.
I'm saying do we? Because because we've been starved of it for so long, we get all excited. And round 2 rolls around pretty quickly.
It does, but I think the first 5 weeks of the season, they tend to tell the course of a year. It's been a bit different last year when Brisbane fought back from it. Yep. But you can, as a player, you can convince the opposition that you're better than you are just by your ladder position and your record. Like last year, everyone thought Brisbane were gettable, even though they were playing okay, they were just losing and stuff, and they go on and win the flag. If you win early, everyone goes, they're up and about. Even if you're beating terrible teams, you convince people that you're better. And it's all in the mind, isn't it? So now Fremantle are doubting themselves. Other teams that got belted on the weekend are doubting themselves. Teams that flog someone, they're feeling really, really good. And it's that small margin where you go, what will happen next? Will I attack this ball? Will I defend? That's where you're in the margins and going, well, how do you handle it? And that's the result of round 1.
Well, they're going to have to bring a different game, Cod, because Sydney are zipping 2, but they've been pretty good.
They'll be doubting themselves, won't
very
they?
Unlucky, though, to lose both games.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe not Hawthorn, but they've been in both games, is what I'm trying to say. So they haven't done a lot wrong, Sydney. They've got some structural issues, but so they're going to be. They're not. Freo aren't playing a struggling side this week.
And that's the thing, they're 0-2, so they're thinking they're struggling. They're trying to talk themselves into the fact, Sydney, that they're okay. And Fremantle are 0-1 and get belted, so they're trying to say, no, it was only one game. So it's a mindset game this week, isn't it? Like you see it all the time. Collingwood won a flag by saying, we win close games, GWS though saying, we can run out things better than anyone else. It's all in the mind now after the start of the season where one team goes, was that us? And the other team goes, that's us. So, it's an interesting start.
The other mob across town, Cod, West Coast. So interesting in the media box beforehand, just general banter amongst people. Who do you think is going to win? It was a 50-50 split. No, I thought Gold Coast would win, but given their poor record travelling, I thought, it's going to be a bit of an arm wrestle, and I think that they come out on top, which would have been a good result for West Coast. What we got was awful. They were insipid. There was no fight. They were absolutely smashed in the midfield. I'll give Jack Graham a bit of an out. I thought Liam Baker was okay, Brady Hoff. Harry Edwards and Jeremy McGovern, I felt sorry for them. There's not much they could do with that onslaught. It was just a matter of time. So I'll sort of give them outs. But there was just, Tim Kelly was horrible. There was no fight at all in that midfield. And Matt Rowell, Noah Anderson, courtesy of a bloody good ruckman in Jared Wirtz, were able to do what they liked. It was like they were bullying the Eagles off the ball.
So they had 72 more disposals for the game.
That's not good.
33 more inside 50s, 10 more free kicks, 58 more hitouts, 17 more clearances, 43 more contested possessions, and laid more tackles despite having more of the footy.
How do you lay more tackles in those circumstances?
Yeah.
That, my friend, is what you call a pantsing.
And you talk about Fremantle 10:30 a.m. What we have to remember is Gold Coast didn't train for a week.
Yeah.
They had a cyclone going on. Their ground was flooded. Their homes were flooded.
Actually, both their teams did. Both teams won.
Yeah.
From
They had
Queensland.
no electricity to be able to cook. They're struggling to sleep. All these elements, like their lives were genuinely in turmoil up there where you're wondering what the hell's going on. So no sleep, no food, no training. That's not a recipe for being an athlete, is it?
No.
And then you come over here and do that. Like that's the real damning thing for West Coast, that they had a team that had no right to be prepared to win, and they got absolutely flogged. So I think it's a reminder to West Coast of just how far off the pace they are, because everyone gets positive during the pre-season. But and Gold Coast are clearly going to be a good team now. But yeah. Anyone who was saying, West Coast could win 6 to 10 games, I think it's 6 and less. What do you reckon is possible?
I thought 6 to 8, but I tell you what, on that, they're going to struggle to win 4. But again, sample size, it's one game in, so let's just hold our fire for a little while. That was horrible, but let's just hold our fire. It's interesting, the post-game, Andrew McQualter, whose game plan we did not even get a look at because they didn't have their hands on the footy. So we don't know what sort of brand this is. We've got an idea what sort of brand he wants to bring, but we had no evidence of that because they couldn't get the footy. It's an interesting post-match. McQualter, you could tell, was like, what was that? He did his best to try and answer the questions, but really he had no answers to that. And Damien Hardwick was almost apologetic to McQualter. He was almost saying, it's a hard caper. He'll get the... And no doubt he's a good footy person, Andrew McQualter, and I'm sure he'll bring some great things to the Eagles. But Damien was almost like, sorry.
Do you reckon it was the worst case scenario for Andrew McQualter to come up against Damien Hardwick when he's using Damien Hardwick's game plan?
Yes.
He's saying, I'm going to play like Richmond did. And Damien Hardwick's going, well, I know how to stop that because I designed the game plan. I also worry that the game plan that they're trying to implement is one that Richmond was suited to. They had a team that was built around playing that style. They said, where are our strengths? This is what we're going to do.
They're trying to build the squad around it.
They're trying to build the squad around it. And they're not a highly skilled squad at the moment, West Coast. They're a young squad. And it's to hack the ball forward under any circumstances and gain territory and create chaos is great when you're experienced in a big body. It's not great when you're young. And then all of a sudden the turnover game happens and Gold Coast did, I think it was 75 points off turnover. And it's like, wow, what's happening here? Yeah. So I worry that they're not going to be able to control the game from turnovers. Do you have concerns around what the damage is going to look like when things go against them?
Yes, I do. And I always did, but I expected more than what we got at the weekend. And again, I'll hold my fire. But if that keeps getting dished up, like I expect... Of course, it's going to look ugly when it's going the other way at times, but you want some fight. And it just was absent. What really concerned me about that, you've got 2 very good players in that team. Harley Reid, and we'll talk about his wrestling in a moment, because I'll finally concede. He's just doing too much of it, right? And Oscar's the other one, Oscar Allen, who it's not Jake Waterman or Oscar Allen's fault. The ball wasn't down there. And when it was there, they looked good when they went direct, the very few occasions. Oscar and Harley, if they're thinking about moving, I'll tell you what, they've got plenty of evidence to do so on that.
Oscar's last 10 losses. So his last, when he's out there and they lose, they have been losing by 87 points, 93 points, 65, 35, 72, 13, that was a good one, 54, 61, 30, and 50. So his last 10 losses have been by an average of 56 points. And he's thinking, do I want to keep going around like this?
And the win, one of the few wins, he basically won the
Against
game
North
from
Melbourne,
off his own boot.
Yeah, so
against North.
when they lose, they get flogged. So that's a real concern for West Coast with him being out of contract and going, oh, geez, Hawthorn are fun to watch. Oh, Brisbane. He's going to Brisbane this week. Imagine what that's going to be like for him.
They're still the front runners. Brisbane,
So that's a real worry. And the Harley Reid stuff, like, Harley just doesn't look interested.
No, he doesn't. I'd agree.
He hasn't looked interested all pre-season.
I think he looks underdone and disinterested, and that's really bad for a kid of his age playing in his second season of AFL. The wrestling, it sucks a lot of energy out of you, and now it's at the point now where it's a bit like Sicily in his earlier days. The opposition knew they could put him off his game just by getting into his head. Is that now happening with Harley? And it's a brutal world, the AFL. He's got all the talent in the world, but you've got to focus on the footy and less on the wrestling, Harley.
Yeah, and that was a problem in the second half of last year after the St Kilda game where he got tagged by Windhager and then copped the suspension for the dangerous tackle. He came out and said, well, I'm going to fight back to prevent people from tagging me. But all it did was encourage people to tag him more. And he wants to win every single battle that he takes personally now, as opposed to saying, well, I'm just going to win by getting the next footy. He wants to go backwards and fix up that last contest and say, well, you're not going to have one over the top of me. The real concern I had from the weekend, last year, 53% of his possessions were contested. On the weekend, 31% were. That's the lowest of his career so far. So he stopped going to get the ball in the way that we know. He's a contested beast.
Yeah.
He had one tackle, which is the equal lowest of his career so far. He had one clearance, which is the lowest of his career so far. And his 12 disposals was the equal lowest as well. So that's how bad the game was from his perspective. It's not him. It's not the way he's learned to play. And we had concerns about his condition when he came back at the start of pre-season. He looked overweight and unfit. He then got injured afterwards. He's had all these promotional things he's been doing away from the game. He doesn't look like the professional athlete you want him to be at this time of the year, and that is what he's paid to do. And he's gonna earn more than $250,000 this year. He might not be the $20 million over 10 years player, but he wants to become that. He needs to get back to what his core focus is, which is winning the ball at charging clear and having impact.
And we saw one example, third quarter, charging clear, goal from just on 50. That's Harley. There's another attempt earlier in the game where he just went to the wrong side of the post. But so he keeps reminding us of what's there. But you're right. I have great concerns. They need to, no doubt they've already done this, but they need to get in his ear at the club, not only his coaches, but his teammates, and say, hey, mate, we're here for you. But it's less of the wrestling. We need you attacking the football.
So I'd go the opposite way. I'd read him the riot act if I was Andrew McCall.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, absolutely get stuck in and say, this is unacceptable and you need to pull your finger out. And the reason why is because he's never had this sort of a challenge in his life. He's been the superstar as a kid. He's then gone and played VFL footy against men, but in the year that he's getting drafted, and everyone's saying you'll be the number one pick, he's being fated. Everything's gone well for him. And the problem for those players like that is they've never experienced the big setback until they get to the AFL. Whereas everyone else is like, oh, it's been hard to get here.
Back in the spotlight with everyone. And don't forget, elite junior footy, you're not tagged.
Correct.
So
when you have your first big setback on the big stage, it's like, whoa. So you can cuddle them and say, oh, it'll be okay. Or you can say, this is the reason why we told you in the off-season you had to be fitter. This is the reason why you have to train harder. This is what it's going to be like for the next 10 years or 15 years of your career. So now's the chance to fix this up and get it right. And you will have... the world will be your oyster. No one will be able to stop you, as opposed to, oh, it'll be okay. You can't say it'll be okay, or else he'll continue doing things. It's a good lesson for him here to be able to say, you aren't as prepared as what you could have been. Here's the consequence now. Pull your finger out. Let's get down to work, and let's make you the player that you know you can be.
Someone like a Chris Judd would be great to have a word with him, just about the tag situation. Elliot Yeo, who's been mentoring him, who's not playing at the moment, geez, they could have done with him at the weekend.
Yeah, absolutely.
He's another one who could get in his ear and say, but Elliot's been both a player who's had a tag and been a run with himself. So he knows what it's all about.
And he's experienced how hard that part of it is, isn't it?
So he's either not listening or they're not telling him, and they really should be telling him.
And that's the fear, that they're not telling him, that they don't want... I reckon that the worry would be, if we go too hard, will he want to leave? And then but if we don't go hard enough, will he continue doing this? And then he'll want to leave anyway. So it's a delicate balancing act for them, I think, about how you handle it. But I think going hard and then saying, nah, unacceptable on the weekend. Here's how we can make you the player you want to be, and this is the way forward to it. That's got to be the way to get out of this for Harley, because otherwise he's going to be in for a really difficult season.
Oh, well, at least there's some respite for them, Cod. They're going to Brisbane to play the Lions at the Gabba.
The Gabatoire is just waiting for them. Oh, I know it's been ugly up there. It was ugly up there in the past, so yeah, goodness knows what it's going to look like at the moment.
Now, before we get on to some of the other games, as a proud major sponsor of the Fremantle Football Club, Woodside has accepted the challenge of supporting local footy at all levels, from grassroots to greatness, so it can thrive throughout WA. Woodside, Australia's leading energy company. Let's talk about the Tribunal, the MRO, already in the spotlight. I will preface it by saying the Tribunal will sit tonight to adjudicate on these cases. These are more opinions from us.
So, by the time a lot of people hear this, the decision will be made on some of them.
Exactly. So these are our opinions, what should happen. Let's start with the one everyone's talking about, which is Jackson Archer and Luke Cleary. I reckon that 3 weeks was the penalty. I think there's a duty of care from both players, and I think the duty of care is more in the hands of Luke Cleary than it is in Jackson Archer, which is why I think he should get off. I don't think he will get off, by the way, but because I think this is what the AFL will argue, but I think he should.
Why do you think Cleary owes duty of care?
Because I think he could. Jackson Archer could have a broken leg right now. You saw him clutch at his knee after that incident as it was. So I was really worried about his legs until I look back at it, and then you see what happened to Luke Cleary. So certainly I hope he's okay. And I commend him for going for the footy, but he has dived at his legs.
So you think it's a contact below the knees?
I do, absolutely. I think
Archer?
And while I am massive, I am on head contact, and the head is sacrosanct. But you've also got to have a duty of care as the player going for the ball, and that could have been a serious injury to Archer. So I am more on that's a free kick, that's below the legs. They were paid all weekend, Cod. There was not as quite as brutal as that incident, but there was a number of free kicks below the legs paid over the weekend. So the AFL are hot on it, and that one really surprised me. I thought there was a bit of a deceleration because he was coming at pace. I understand the AFL will argue, the acceleration towards the contest. That's what they will argue. And he also has a duty of care. I thought it was really interesting listening to Luke Beveridge last night as well on 360, I think it was, talking about that he hopes that he gets off. He hopes he doesn't miss any footy. He thinks he's a ball player. So really interesting, Cod. I've got a feeling you're going to disagree with me.
Yeah, I disagree. I don't think it's a contact below the knees free kick.
Okay.
I think.
How come?
So I don't believe he chose to go to ground. I think he was pushed in the back by Costanti behind him, which forced him forward. He was bending down to pick the ball up. I don't think he made a voluntary decision to go to ground and slide. So that's why I don't think it's a contact below the knees free kick. Because I
reckon he contributed to it. But yeah,
in a way, he was off balance. He got the contact. There's a picture we'll put up now for the people who are watching it on YouTube. If you have a look at it, you got Jackson Archer is to the far left of the screen. Harry Sheasel is the closest North Melbourne player to Jackson Archer, and if you look at it, he actually stopped and propped from where he was. Archie gets closer to the ball by the time the contest happens because he recognised that Cleary was going to win the footy here and made the decision, my job is to wait and tackle him when he picks it up. Whereas Archer comes in so fast, he goes past Sheasel and attacks the ball at such a pace that he couldn't slow down. He's a good, I reckon that's 7-8 metres when you look at the strip of grass away from the ball compared to the half a metre that Cleary is away.
More.
Yeah, so I think that's an indication that at that point, I think Archer had enough of evidence in front of him that he wasn't going to win the footy and it was his responsibility to lay the tackle rather than maintain the speed that he went at because he's in no control of his body once it gets there. And that's a bobbling ball. He was always going to make physical contact and not be able to win the footy, I think. So the fact that Sheasel recognised it and slowed down and Archer didn't slow down and actually sped up, I think that's what's going to cause Archer the problem because he doesn't show any duty of care towards Cleary.
I reckon he does decelerate.
He's going flat knacker.
He was going flat knacker, and then I think he decelerates at the last minute when he realises there's going to be contact here. That's where I think it'll be decided around whether or not he showed enough duty of care towards Cleary with the way he attacked the contest. And I think Sheasel's
decision himself will hurt Archer because Sheasel went, I'm not going to be the one to go in here and make the contact. I expect you to win the ball and I will
normally
tackle.
he would be the one who's dished out to because that's what Sheasel's expecting.
Yeah, but the players have been taught for a lot. It's been, I was still umpiring when this law changed, where they basically said give way. And it was about, and I retired in 2012, where they said if you are going towards a player, he has his head down over the football, you are expected to stop and prop and allow them to come towards you with their momentum and then lay the tackle. And that's what Sheasel did. Did the stop and prop, whereas Archer just kept on barreling through him. So, but there's an argument. Your argument you can definitely mount if you're North Melbourne, and I think if they can mount it really strongly, they'll give themselves a case. But I think the AFL will mount the other argument really strongly as well, that there's a duty of care there. So
I think it'll
come down to who mounts the better argument at the time.
Of course it will.
And that's what tribunals are. By going to the tribunal, you give yourself a chance to mount the argument. That's all that matters. Everything else is irrelevant. It's how well your lawyer mounts the argument and gives the tribunal a reason to say, yes, you're right.
As I said earlier, I'm massive for the head is sacrosanct, but I think we can't adjudicate unfortunate accidents out of footy. They happen. And we hate them. We hate seeing them. We look away. You can't watch them. But there are still unfortunate accidents. I put this into that category, but I guess we'll find out, won't we? A couple of other interesting ones. The Justin McInerney, who's accepted the 3-match ban for his collision with Brandon Starcevic. Both of them have a history of concussion. And Brandon, I hated to see that the other night.
Yeah.
It was shocking because he's a great player. I love the way he plays the game, but there's a worrying number of concussions he's suffered now, 3 in recent memory. But I wonder whether I feel for Justin McInerney because it was a bit of an innocuous incident, and I guess he's got he's got to accept the 3. There's no way of arguing it down now, but.
His problem was that their heads bumped.
Yeah,
the head clash is what's cost him 3 weeks. If it was body on body, there's no issue with it. It was quite a light bump, but once you choose to bump, if the heads collide, you're considered liable.
Is he a victim of Brandon's history though here?
I don't think so, because if you watch McInerney afterwards, he continues to go for the ball, and then as soon as it disappears, he lays on the ground and holds his own head.
Okay.
So I think the head clash. Starcevic has obviously got the history, which makes it a bit harder, but the head clash is often enough in those situations to cause some sort of concussion. So once you choose to bump and you're unfortunate enough that the heads do collide, then you're going to cop the suspension. And that's why they haven't bothered going to the tribunal, because they realise that whilst his intent wasn't to hurt him, the heads happened.
Tom Lynch, all I'll say with that one is good luck. He's challenging that 1 week ban. You and I, as soon as we saw it, I went, you're having a holiday.
Yep.
So good luck with that one. Jack Scrimshaw. So the Hawks will try and argue severe down to high. So he gets 2, not 3. He's going to miss a couple with concussion anyway. Look, I think I'd be okay with the 3. I think it was a really cheap shot. It was late. It was a round arm. Ball had gone past. That doesn't augur well for him, I think, in getting this down. There might be a sneaky chance, but I just think it was a bit of a cheap shot from a very good player, and he doesn't need to do that. Yeah,
it was. They'll try to use the line that Ridley didn't go off straight away, so maybe he copped another bump. They'll show every single contest that Ridley was in. Did these all contribute to it afterwards? Because it was about 20 minutes later that he had the concussion test. So they'll suggest that he was actually okay at the time and that there were more collisions that hurt him. I think this challenge is more around the fact that Hawthorn have the early bye because they're playing in opening round, so it'll end up being 4 weeks he doesn't play for rather than 3.
Get back in Easter, I think he misses gather round.
Yeah,
so
suddenly he's got 3 weeks suspension and a bye. You don't play for a month. Yeah. So it's a throw at the stumps in the hope that you can get it down.
And he's a very important player to their structure now. Scrimshaw, very important.
Oh, and fair to him getting subbed out by Josh Battle, hitting him in the head afterwards, cost me my fantasy footy game on the weekend as well.
No,
and Battle was in the opposition. You gotta hate these sorts of scenarios.
Now, Cod, we had 24 debutants over the weekend. I loved Sam Lawler's game on Thursday night. Murphy Reid, we talked about. Isaac Kako, your boy. Yep. It was a hard going for him, but I thought he showed plenty. Xavier Lindsay at Melbourne just looks an AFL player. Levi Ashcroft, oh my goodness. He just steps in, doesn't he? There was a lot more too, but it was a pretty impressive and another tick for the the way these kids can just come in now and have an impact.
Yeah, it was talked up as a super draft, and what we've seen so far is those kids have all come in and played really well and have been ready and prepared for the possibility and the opportunity that was in front of them. Lawler just inspired the whole country, I reckon, on Thursday night, like to come in front of that sort of a crowd and to not only play well, but to lift a team that wasn't expected to even compete.
Well,
let's be honest, win the damn game.
You know what my comment was at halftime? Yawn. Boring.
Yep.
This is going to be a 100-point loss. And I could not believe what I saw in that second half. Kudos to Richmond. Got the game on their terms. Nankervis was fantastic. Great duel with De Koning. But Carlton, I mean, we've been talking about Freo and West Coast. That was pathetic in the second half. There was no fight. They were sloppy. They were second-guessing. And they were really nervous. And you could see Richmond were feasting on it.
And the kids, like Lawler, when you see someone like Lawler, you talk about all the debutants, they come in and you see that's why they drafted them. And Carlton didn't have that spark with players, did they? They looked slow. They looked like they just didn't have any way of changing the game, whereas Richmond's kids and Murphy Reid and Isaac Kako and Levi Ashcroft, these guys who've come in all of a sudden, Campriale was pretty good for Carlton. All these guys who come in, you go, that's why they were drafted early. They've got some tricks. They've got some athleticism. They can do so many different things that can change games. I think that's what was the most exciting thing about the weekend, that sometimes you see first-round draft picks, you go, you're going to be a good, solid player for a long time and just be able to win the footy. These guys all look like match winners, which is the most exciting part of the 24.
Didn't have much at the fall of the footy in the front half, I thought, Carlton. I thought Cripps was great. McIntosh, that was a good duel. I thought De Koning was wonderful. And I thought Wiedering couldn't have done much more where he was, but in that back half. But there's a lot of concerns there for Voss, I think, with this result.
I loved how Talkback Radio lit up straight away with people's. I was over in Melbourne at the time, and everyone sack him.
Oh yeah.
Sack him.
Yeah. I love the Vox pops after these games. It's just the punters, the supporters.
Carlton fans are up and
coming out
about
the
early,
ground, ripping jumpers off, and stick with them. Stick with them. That's all I can say. Some other performances, mate. I'll start with Bailey Smith in the game we've already discussed, but Geelong v Freo. He was actually a little bit rusty because it's his first game for 19 months.
Yep.
And how good was he?
He's a specimen too, isn't he? My God. You'd love to have his athleticism and figure. What he could do, his physicality out the ball, the way he runs with it. Chris Scott was saying today before the game that a normal person feels anxiety. Bailey Smith just feels more confident.
Yeah.
He's the way he approaches the game is incredible. But what he's done to Geelong is, once again, you've got Max Holmes in that midfield who just needs an extra bit of support to run and carry the ball. It can't be Danger anymore, so Danger goes forward and Bailey Smith rocks up. It'd be nice to be a club that could just keep recruiting stars like that, wouldn't it?
One of the better games over the weekend was at the MCG. It was wet. It was a real slugfest, but GWS Melbourne, I actually liked Melbourne's game. It was a tick for Petrarca, it was a tick for Oliver, a tick for Lindsay. Gawn was fantastic. GWS just got it done, and it wasn't just on the back of Toby Green, but he went into the middle in the last quarter and just made it happen. He's kicked 3 or 4. He's just such a great leader, Toby Green. Lots to like about this team, GWS.
Do you see Green becoming part of that midfield full time?
Oh, no, I reckon you do what you did. I think he's really important to their forward structure. In that first 3 quarters, he was just making things happen off on the smell of an oily rag, he makes goals happen or scores happen. So I think he's too important. He's definitely a throw him into the middle when they need to. I mean, I wouldn't have him there all the time. I think it helps them to change it up a bit, and they're not lacking anything in that middle, mate. I mean,
and they're not lacking anything.
Callahan's a superstar.
When everyone gets into that forward line as well, and they had the luxury of saying, "Hey, Toby, go in the middle," because we've got Jesse Hogan and Aaron Cadman and Jakey Stringer and Brent Daniels.
Yeah.
And the kid with the lid, Darcy Jones, they've got forwards everywhere just buzzing around. You go, hey, Toby, go get some footy for a while. They're a frightening team.
It was a strange old finish too. Aidan Johnson has the opportunity at one end, misses the goal, and then you see this chain of handballs. Bedford's it was unbelievable handball over the blind handball. Ward, and the most unlikeliest was Lockie Keefe, who's been well touched up by Max Gawn, and just goes back and kicks the goal. There was just so much theatre about it. I was barracking for my tip cod, which was Melbourne, but I got to say I love the finish.
So I was at Melbourne Airport, right, when Johnson had the shot for goal. flight's already boarding, so I'm watching the shot thinking, okay, this game will be over here. And there's a group of Melbourne supporters who are watching it with me who had just got off the previous flight. And everyone just went, oh, well, he's missed, but it's okay. The Melbourne guys are like, we're home. It's a wet day. Ball's in our forward line. Not long enough to go. All over. We've got to go get our bags. I land, and GWS have won. And I'm like, what the hell's happened here? So, it takes a hell of a lot of skill from a team to be able to get the set play right on a wet day when the other team's going to defend like no man's business, to be able to win from there. That they are impressive, GWS.
Look, over in Adelaide were very impressive. St Kilda were very poor. But Adelaide, forward line, well, Thilthorpe looks like he's going to continue from where he left off next year. He was fantastic, Thilthorpe. I struggle to say that. They've got so much now in that forward line. I think Neil Bullen's a really good addition to that forward line. He just complements everyone so well. The midfield, everyone looks better when you've got someone in front of you've got a number of players in front of the ball who look confident and look like they're going to take a few marks, kick a few goals. So I really like their first up performance.
And they've been building for a long time now as well. So they built them. This group's been together for a fair amount of time. These young guys are coming on. They look like St Kilda are ordinary, so it's hard to tell. But when you've got some players like Rankin
and Rochelle, but Rankin's game, very different game, more handballs.
Yep.
But they were handballs, attacking handballs to teammates in great position. So a lot to like about them. Long way to go. It's at home. You're beaten up on a injury-ravaged St Kilda. But you can't do much more than that. So that was impressive. Collingwood, Port Adelaide. So is this just the narrative now with Ken Hinkley? Was it just a bad decision to hand the keys to Josh Carr for next year, but Ken has a farewell lap? I'm really worried about Port Adelaide at the moment in their season. Collingwood were very good, answered a few of their critics, but they're not that good. The vision of Port players just standing flat-footed, not chasing, not running into defensive positions, it was really poor.
We'll know within a couple of weeks whether Port have just torn their season apart by doing this or not. We've seen teams, say Fremantle had the shocker the other day. We've seen Collingwood had the shocker in round one. So if Port dish up another one or two of them, then we'll know that it's an absolute disaster. So they're just on a watch list of how will they perform? Can they fight back? If Ken can't get them to fight back, then they've got real problems.
Western Bulldogs North Melbourne told me absolutely nothing, Cod. The Dogs got it done, and they had their injuries as well, so well done to them. North just couldn't fire the shot when they needed to. They were almost.
And that's what it told me. Darling, Caleb Daniel and Luke Parker have given the more experience, but the young guys just aren't ready, because that was a group of Western Bulldogs players missing a host of superstars and were ripe for the picking, and North still couldn't get them. So North are remaining down the bottom of the ladder this year. Until they can win one.
Hopefully the penny will drop at some point, and they just need some belief, don't they? They need to know how to play four quarters and how to win games of football. They don't know how to win.
That was their opportunity, and they wasted it.
Brisbane, Sydney, well done to Brisbane. Zach Bailey, 4 goals, and they had some real issues early. Lohman was out of the game. Charlie Cameron was a late withdrawal.
Lockie Neal barely touched it.
Lockie Neal was tagged out of that game by James Jordan, so 10 possessions or whatever he had, and they still win the game of football with all that adversity. I think that's a really good sign for Brisbane. I felt for Sydney because they've been so close. And they've done not too much wrong. Really interested to see what they do with McCartan now, because you're coming up against Freo, who have got a couple of good key forwards. And McCartan, we know he's played his best footy as a defender. Do they persist with this?
Probably for a couple more weeks and then throw it away if it doesn't work. But 2 probably isn't a big enough sample size for Dean Cox to change his mind.
Yeah, but structurally, I just worry about this week.
I think we'd all make the move, but I think footy clubs end up saying we'll stick with what we planned over summer for a bit longer.
Our 2 teams, Hawthorn, Essendon. It was a entertaining game on Friday night. I thought your team, Essendon, really good around stoppage. Smashed Hawthorn at stoppage, beat them well in clearance. It was just elite use by foot.
And really it was over early.
Yeah,
it was over early.
Yes, and it just didn't look like they were going to win it. There were patches where they started to claw back, but Hawthorn would just go bang bang with their elite foot. The Sicily to Eamon, the set plays. It was just
Hawthorn were a class above.
So
Until Essendon can defend that first onslaught that Hawthorn produced, then Essendon aren't going to go anywhere. And Hawthorn are a team to be seriously reckoned with.
They don't want to keep coughing that up, that sort of stuff every week, because they'll get found out sooner or later. And it could be, you'd expect Hawthorn to beat Carlton this week, but they've got, I think, only 58% of their tackles failed at the weekend, Hawthorn, so they don't want to dish that up against Cripps and Walsh and these sites this week. Favourite time of the week, Cod?
Saddle up your camel. It's time for the Thirsty Camel mailbag.
This week, we'll be giving away a $50 digital voucher thanks to Thirsty Camel. This week's special, Corona. Pick up 2 12-packs for $61.99 a carton. Get your questions into the Thirsty Camel mailbag, TheWestSport at wanews.com.au. Please include your mobile number at the bottom of your email, as we will send you a digital voucher if you are a weekly winner. Hi, guys. If Andrew McQualter is wanting to set the standard early in his tenure, would you consider dropping Harley Reid? No matter what your reputation, you should still need to earn selection on merit and performance. He's looked well short on fitness and intent on Sunday. Appreciate your thoughts, Scott. We've actually spoken about Harley at length. I would say not this week.
No.
But I think you give him a month and you've got to make a statement at some point if he's not producing.
Yeah, there'll be a form line that will build to a player losing their spot, not one game. So I think it's too early to even consider that. But if it continues for an extended period of time, then he's no different to anyone else.
Of course, you can build your tank, so
yes.
The more you play. Last year, Fremantle was labelled beige. This year, the coach thought their performance against the Indigenous Stars was vanilla. They repeated that vanilla performance on the weekend. Hopefully, the remaining games this season, they are not playing vanilla, beige, bone or off-white. After 30 years, fans want the cream. That's from Michelle.
The vanilla comment was based on a pre-season game. On the weekend, they were just terrible. I don't think it had anything to do with vanilla, beige, or off-white.
That was one pre-season game. Do you reckon he'd regret that comment?
He does regret the comment now. What he was trying to say is we went out and treated it just like go and play footy. Don't try to do all your tricks. Don't practice anything that we want to keep as a set play or our main game.
But they didn't want to give anything away because of the cameras behind the goals.
But
as well.
I think he would regret. I don't think he'd regret having them play that way. I think he'd regret saying the phrase because it's going to stick with him all year.
Why would you have them play that way though? Don't you want them to play in pre-season as you're playing in the season proper? Surely.
Yeah, it's interesting when you reflect back on it because they haven't started the season well. But it was also up against an Indigenous All-Stars team, which are all short guys and not a really structural team that you would normally come up against. So would it have worked anyway? I think more the problem was that they just didn't. It was an inexperience for our team that was put out there as well when you take out the guys who are injured plus Walters and Bolton into the other team and Pearce unavailable. I just think that they treated it as like a go get some match fitness into you rather than worry about too many other things.
I hear the AFL HQ and clubs want to have drug testing results for players reported to more than the club doctor. Some say maybe inform the presidents, coach, family members to assist the player who tests positive. All very fair. How about all the people working at AFL HQ, Channel 7, Fox Footy, The West, and coaches and staff within clubs having the same rules applied? Maybe they could set an example and self-report any executive indiscretions to the media too. Just a thought. That's John from Karrinyup. I'm happy to have some tests.
Drug test me any day of the week, and if you want to pay me $700,000 a year to do the job, well, or $800 or $1 million, you can drug test me every hour.
Yeah, I agree.
That's my approach. So if you want to play AFL footy, don't do drugs.
I agree with that. Thanks for listening. We are brought to you by Tab Touch. Got the touch? Download the Tab Touch app today. What's gambling really costing you? Remember, you can watch or listen to this podcast on YouTube Music. Leave us a rating and a review. And don't forget to follow this podcast so you don't miss an episode. Talk to you on Thursday, Cod. Thanks very much for your time. Looking forward to reading your stuff for the rest of the week and this weekend.
Always fun, Quarters.
Cheers, mate.